Hey there, my name is Rachael.
I'm Annie.
And I'm Shelby. And welcome to the Magdala Podcast.
We know from experience that pornography, masturbation, and other sexual addictions are not just a guy problem.
The need for women to be accompanied in their journey toward healing from addiction has gone sorely unmet, and that's why we're here.
Magdala is a space where women can find hope, healing, and freedom from sexual addiction through support, community, and accountability.
Here on the podcast, you'll find everything from testimonies to practical advice to discussions on how to live fully as a Catholic woman.
You are not alone, and wherever you are on your journey, we welcome you to this table.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Magdala Podcast. It's Rachael here with a guest I'm kind of surprised it's taken us this long to have on. I have Kelsey Skoch with me today. Kelsey is an amazing witness to the reality of healing in our sexuality. She's been a voice and an advocate for women for years. She was a Magdala board member kind of from our genesis. So you were very involved in the early years of Magdala too. So it's just a gift to have her today. But we're going to be talking about healing desire and pleasure within marriage in regards to sexual brokenness. So just for any listeners who are either dating, engaged, married, maybe this will speak to your current walk of life or things you're discerning. If not, we hope this is just a message of hope and a witness to the healing power of the sacraments. But Kelsey, I would love for you to share with our listeners just a little bit about you and your passion for this topic, just women and sexual brokenness, but would love for you to give our listeners some background.
Yeah. Well, a little bit about me. I mean, I am married, living near Kansas City, Kansas, and I've got four beautiful children, pregnant with baby number 5.
Crazy.
I know. I think when we first met, I'm trying to even think if
I think it was 2.
I think I had 2 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is crazy because there's almost a 4-year spread between this one and the last one.
Yeah. And I have 2 now, which is crazy. So, and I had none last time we met.
Yeah. But I mean, I think I was trying to count how many years I have been doing like this particular ministry. I think it's almost 15 at this point,
Wow.
15 years. Not to date myself, but yeah, I think working with the Apostolate of Focus, Fellowship of Catholic University Students, and doing that for so many years, that kind of, to your question of what brought on this passion, right? Sexual addiction is a part of my own personal story, my own testimony. And then when I became a missionary and started working with a lot of women and leading Bible studies and just seeing the desire for the Lord and a relationship with the Lord, but there being such a block for so many people and so many women because of sexual sin and it's a lot of shame, but then a lot of just not even knowing how to heal from their past, from their current situation. And so just asking some more questions and talking to a lot of higher leadership, and then doing my own research of who in the Catholic space, who in the Christian space even, is speaking specifically for women in this area. And there really just weren't those resources available. And so, the whole see a need, fill a need, and the Lord just putting it on my heart to be that answered prayer. And I started just talking to fellow missionaries and obviously my students, but then slowly kind of, they invited me to speak. And so speaking at a training here and there, and then, being invited to speak on a larger stage at a conference. And then that rolled into writing my first book and kind of getting my own full story out there to help women heal and know that they're not alone, right? And that's when we first met, realizing just the importance of the more women out there talking about this, the better, right? This is like we are all in this together. We want to help every person, but specifically every woman, know that they are loved, that they are called to this full freedom in their relationship with the Lord, and that any shame and any of that, just I want to free them of that. I want them to be fully available. So yeah, that's kind of how it started. And I mean, I never thought I'd speak on pornography and masturbation, that I would coach on it and do all the things that I've been doing, but I love it. And so the Lord definitely has had his hand in making this part of my life.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so you've moved into coaching in more recent years, right? And
Correct.
what is that one-on-one work brought to your knowledge of this topic? Because I feel like that's such a specific it's such a specific mode of accompaniment that I think brings so much depth. But do you work with betrayal trauma as well? Like what is your coaching kind of looked like lately?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. I think my clients have kind of been all over the board. It's
Mhm.
been about 3 years where I've stepped into this on more of a professional level. And it's hard because, I've been doing it for 15 years, but then doing it to this capacity feels a little bit more formal.
Yeah.
But they're across the board. I mean, shame is across the board. So you mentioned betrayal trauma. I would say most of the women that I work with one-on-one, because I've also led Magdala groups, I'm often like, go
Mhm.
to Magdala. Here's this incredible,
Yeah.
way. So a lot of the women that come to me do have a lot more shame and desire to be one-on-one and to kind of really kind
Yeah.
of meet them there. But then also I think too, the one-on-one gives a deeper just insight into, okay, what's really going on? What is your personal story?
Yeah.
Let's get into the weeds here. And so I think everyone's story has been very different, whether it's how they were exposed, what
Yeah.
what it's kind of, how addicted it has become. Um, but all of them, we start with a basic foundation every time my first official meeting, we open up Genesis 2 and 3, and it's like, let's look at our identity and who we are.
Mhm.
And that's probably my favorite meeting every time because that's just the most important piece of all of it. And so even
Yeah.
though all of our stories might look different, the desire for being known and the desire to be loved is the same. And so having
Yeah.
those reminders be the pillars is just it's an honor to be able to speak into that place.
Yeah. That's so beautiful. I love that. I love that as a beginning too. And thinking of Magdala's curriculum, that's why we start out with desire as the first session of just like this return to the belief that we're good,
Yes.
and that we're created good and to be loved and to love well. Which, speaking of, I think that dovetails really well into our topic today, of just talking about marriage and diving into marriage, entering into the sacrament, with a history of sexual brokenness. And this is something that we get a lot of questions about within Magdala, and I'm sure you do as well. Um, we get it on like the front end from unmarried women of just kind of this idea that they've sort of ruined themselves for marriage, which I think is largely based in like purity culture beliefs and just some old stuff there. But we also get a lot of questions from engaged or married women just about how to enter into newness, how to have honest conversations, fruitful conversations, and also how not to criminalize your own desire, because there's this feeling that it got you into a dangerous spot before. So I would just love to hear, maybe to start out, what was your experience like, as much or as little as you want to share, entering into marriage with a history of sexual compulsion? What did your fears look like? What did your hesitations and hopes look like? And also maybe some insights from the women that you've gotten to walk with of what has that journey looked like for them?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the outlook I had, might be different from others because of what I just shared. Before I had even gotten engaged, I had started doing this work and speaking on this topic and helping other women and it was very public in that sense and in having that platform early on. And so when I started dating my now husband, he was aware that that was part of that platform, but I was very particular, or I just really believed that the fullness of my story, right? I've written my book and there are a lot more details in it than we'll even be able to get to here. But no one other than my confessor and my husband knows more details. And I wanted to make sure that he was my husband. And so when we were engaged is when I gave him more of the full story. So even though he knew there was a little bit from it, about it, that this was part of my story, he didn't really ask, and I didn't offer any more particular details until engagement. And then so for me in that conversation, that also was the conversation of, his own background and experience, and then as well as our own expectations moving into marriage and what that would look like for both of us. And, we did a few different things in our marriage prep. We read 3 to Get Married, which I loved and highly recommend. And then we also read the book Holy Sex. And we'd been told, and I also recommend, to not read that particular book until you're closer into the step of marriage. So, that 1 month prior, because especially with someone with a past of sexual compulsion, that can be triggering in some of the later part of that book. But I think that book really helped as well, because first half is very foundational. And then the second half is more practical. And that just opened up more conversation of, okay, we are about to enter into marital intimacy. What are your thoughts on this? What are your thoughts on this? What are you comfortable, not comfortable? And that it just gave us a little bit more context to be able to have those discussions. And then, of course, once you're married, then those conversations only double, triple, quadruple over the time and when you were actually experiencing it. And I had the experience of never having had full intercourse prior to marriage. So my only experience was my experience with pornography and masturbation, really. And so to answer the question of what fears or hesitations, I don't know if that's how you worded it, but I think there was just a question in my mind of the unknown, of not knowing how this would look, what my experience might be, how my past would affect my marriage. But I am very grateful that because of who my husband is and the conversations we had, that I could just trust that whatever came out, and that I had a true partner to walk with me through that, and vice versa. And so I think there was a lot of safety there with him and I entering into marriage, and knowing that, hey, there's these unknowns, but I have a partner who we will talk through, and we will, whatever might come up, I have someone to navigate with each. Yeah.
Gosh, as you say that, I'm thinking, obviously we've both been married for varying amounts of time. I'm about to hit 5 years. And then we both have children. And I think having children and postpartum, that brings a whole different level of conversation, to the sexuality conversation. But like, as you say that, if I have a partner that I'm safe with and can walk with, I'm thinking of so many conversations from my own life in my own marriage of like, just navigating the messiness of figuring all of it out together. But that's just been a stable foundation over and over, is like just the safety. And it's striking, like so many things that you shared too, that I relate to heavily, of speaking about this or working in this prior to meeting your spouse. I was similar. I think I actually mentioned the fact that I led a support group for fellow students in college, like in my first conversation with my husband. I didn't even notice that I said it. Like he says that I did. I don't even remember. Because that just became such a part of my life.
Right.
And later in college and then beyond. And so he knew stuff too. And then, has received obviously the full story over time. And is the only one who has received the full story other than a spiritual director and a therapist. But I think what's striking to me too, I mean, and beyond the safety that you mentioned, part of that for me is I had this fear that, because I was a virgin whose only experience was with pornography. I had this fear that it was going to feel similar. Like it's all just going to feel so similar, and I'm going to have such a hard time distinguishing all of it. Right. And what's, I think, been radically healing to me is that it feels like such a completely different thing. It's like, this expression of unity and love with my spouse feels like a completely different thing than me, dissociating and acting out in this particular way when I was feeling really heavy emotions or whatever, especially as an adolescent and young adult. And I think that speaks to just like our origin and what we're made for, but also just the healing power of the sacrament and what the depth of an emotional relationship with someone will do. Because it's just been, I saw so many of my fears just overturned, and realizing how completely separate the experience was. And that doesn't mean that there aren't moments of being triggered or old fears coming up or whatever, or things that still need to be healed. But I don't know if you had any like similar experiences, but that was one for me of just like, this is such a different thing. And pornography doesn't even kind of hold a candle to what a loving union is. And that was very hopeful for me.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful grace within marriage, is that it did help me see how empty those other acts are. When you experience the fullness and full unity of the act, and that's what I speak to a lot too, is if it's not about white knuckling and removing whatever's triggering you, it's also like filling your mind with truth of what it should be. And when you tell anyone, if I'm giving a talk to college age women and I'm talking about God's design for our sexuality and the unity of two, like a man and a woman in marriage, and you start speaking truth, you see them come alive. Like you see them kind of take, almost exhale, but then there's also like a triumph in their even just their positioning. And then, you put it up against the media and the movies and just the books and the music and anything like that. And it kind of looks pathetic when you hold up the sacredness of the full unity, and then you look at kind of the distortion of the world and how it's portrayed in these other ways. But it's hard to truly understand that until you are filled with truth and like the fullness.
Yeah.
And so I think that definitely happened for me as well in marriage, is once I experienced the full unity, which you can't do outside of marriage, right? Like even outside of marriage, you could have, like, I could have not been a virgin, but it still wouldn't have been full unity. I haven't given my entire life to my spouse. It wasn't sacramental. So I do think there's still always a lack of fulfillment and satisfaction outside of that context that does keep you kind of, in that way. And obviously I don't have that, personal experience, but that's what I've heard from others as well. But it can be tricky, because then I also work with women who are in marriage who still struggle with these compulsions and still have had, or are having intercourse with their spouse. And so helping them, differentiate and see that difference is also crucial, because it can get messy.
Yes. Yeah. Lines get blurred really fast. And I think it's also so important to note that experiencing sex with a spouse in a unitive, fruitful, loving way also doesn't take away the habit. It doesn't take away compulsion. It doesn't take away like the past of brokenness.
Exactly.
And I think that's something that's like promised to us a lot. I feel like in a lot of, again, purity culture stuff of just like this will go away once you're married. Right. And I wish it were that easy.
I feel like that comes from this idea that, that we're acting out of like an animalistic desire that can't be controlled. And so when you have another outlet for it via a person, then the other desire will go away. And and maybe it's purity culture, but I think that's actually that's to me a secular distortion of like our desire for sex comes from an animalistic biological urge, which there's a piece of that, right? But when you look at, the design that we've been given, that is a pathetic or very empty version of it. And so I always say, if you have these compulsions or addictions prior to marriage, they come into marriage like a wrecking ball. They don't just stop and end at the vows. No, they come crashing through, and they wreak some havoc sometimes. So
because I think it's also a mistaken understanding of what causes sexual compulsion in the first place. Like it's not about libido, right? Like it's not about just sex drive, and I think that's what it's often attributed to, or lust or whatever. And not that those aren't elements or participatory elements with other things, but it's such a collapsing of why people seek out pornography and masturbation, why they self-regulate through these means, right? It's like, it's trauma, it's boredom, it's loneliness, it's stress, it's so many different things. And we carry all of those things into marriage too, all of the emotional experiences or, mental experiences that we're coping with. And So,
But it carries then into other issues, right? Where you say,
sure.
well, I'll have the woman with me whose maybe husband has these sexual compulsions, and they think I need to give myself to him X amount of times
Yeah.
so that he doesn't look at that stuff. And so that is that same thought pattern of, oh, this will just end in marriage, is the same thought process of, if I don't get it from my spouse, then essentially giving yourself permission to seek it elsewhere, or
Yes.
the excuse that you give the other, oh, like, because they're not getting it from me, it's either okay, or it's understandable, or whatever, that story has been, that is very harmful, because if you run from that, or like live from that ideology, then it makes the will and the intellect, the battle of like understanding, no, I can actually choose away from these things.
Yeah.
You've completely disarmed that thought, because you think, oh, well, because I'm not having access to it for whatever reason, I quote unquote need it. That's a whole nother.
Oh
the
gosh,
feeling
we
of,
could
like,
record a whole podcast episode about that. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
like, I need sex.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no one ever spontaneously combusted because they never had an orgasm.
Yeah. Jeez.
It's not a need. But like desire, we can talk about that. So yeah, I think that it can be really harmful, especially in marriage, and going on to what you're saying with, this another podcast we could do is on marital debt.
Oh,
But
we've got it later in the season. Yeah.
oh, good.
It's
Okay,
coming. Yeah, it's coming.
Because that's that same poor mentality. I'll just state that. as a
Yeah.
teacher, that
Yes.
podcast.
Yeah. That's a whole nother hour too. But yes, like what a crushing weight to put on a person of like,
Yes.
you're responsible for my acting out. We have a lot of women in Magdala who also experience betrayal trauma alongside their own dealing with compulsion. But then I also have just dear friends and loved ones in my life who have been in this situation too. And yeah, what a terrible, terrible weight to put on a person that you claim to love. Like, that is like really, really horrific, and just makes their trauma
most
so much
of
worse.
them, I don't think, I mean, again, my husband and I always joke, like, I just assume the best will of people. Like, someone's speeding down the road, I'm like, they're probably late to their adoration hour, right? Like, they're in labor, they need
Good
to get
for
to the
you.
hospital.
I wish I was like that.
So I mean, and I've talked to so many people that I think that if you come into marriage with these false beliefs and understandings of our sexuality, and you truly do think like sex is owed to me, or that it is a need.
Yeah.
I was giving a talk with a man who I co-wrote my book with, and it was a gender, like, boys and girls talk, and we had anonymous Q&A, and this guy's question was like, I was told that I could get testicular cancer if I don't essentially like release every so often, and like, I don't want to get cancer, so isn't this an important
Bless. Wow.
health need? And I, tried to not laugh, because it sounds comical, but I'm like, these high school boys in the locker room, like, this is what their conversation is. And he truly believes this to be fact.
Oh.
And so, I had my counterpart answer it. But I think if you have, again, that's a very specific and more obvious like fallacy.
Yeah.
But if you've been growing up or had any influence thinking I need sex or else, and my wife is supposed to provide this, or vice versa, my spouse is supposed to kind of be the release I need in this area, it's horrific. But sometimes I do think it's unintentional.
Yeah. And I think a lot of ideologies lend themselves to that conditioning. Like you pointed out, secular mindsets, but I think purity culture does it too. Like they all have that thread in common. And so like a lot of perspectives, a lot of upbringings can lend themselves to that attitude. Like you find religious justifications for that. You find psychological justifications for it. That's like the example you just listed is like a medical justification. Like it's kind of underneath it all. It's still this, like, this is a need, and somebody else or something else is an object to fulfill it.
The Magdala podcast is sponsored by the Catholic Theology Show, presented by Ave Maria University. The Catholic Theology Show covers themes such as the value of a Catholic higher education, religious liberty, how to pray, the philosophies of St. Thomas Aquinas, and more. Stream episodes on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and learn more by visiting the link below.
I'm curious though, like just for you, yeah, what has, I know we were going to talk about desire. What has, I guess, like, obviously both of us like strive to, for the personalistic norm, people are to be loved and not to be used, right? But like, what did that look like coming into marriage or just living out marriage? What did it look like to, I want to say, trust yourself that you were trying to live into that, and to trust your own desire again, to be in touch with that, to not be afraid of it. Because I think that's the tension that we see in women in recovery a lot. And as women in recovery, I think I've seen it in myself of just like, oh, but wait, like this was a live wire. I probably shouldn't touch that again. And learning like, nope, like this is a good and true and beautiful thing about me that I can trust and lean into and continually seek healing in. And what did that look like for you?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. I think the question of how did you learn to trust yourself and trust your desire? I think it definitely evolved over time, and I grew and learned about myself and my own desires. And I think having patience with yourself to allow that growth to happen, and to try not to get too frustrated. I think if I knew what I knew now, my first year of marriage, things would have looked very differently. And just to like have forgiveness on myself of what I didn't know then, and the conversations I've had since then with my spouse and things like that. One thing that was really helpful was the priest who did our marriage prep. He told us, he said, your first year of marriage will be probably the worst year of sexual intimacy in your marriage. Wow. And that really helped open up. And, I'm sure he'd be like, taken out of context, that could sound a little bit terrorizing. Like, oh, now I'm maybe fearful of my first year of marriage. But for me, it was what I needed to hear to not put pressure on myself. Because I think a lot of people hear, oh, your first year of marriage, you're young, you don't have kids yet. It's supposed to be, where, oh, you've been married for 10, 15 years and you don't have a sex life anymore. That's kind of the secular understanding of what that trajectory looks like. So that early marriage and early, young livelihood, like should be the peak of your sexual experiences. And so him just taking that pressure off, and also through that statement is that unity with your spouse, and in particular when we're talking about sexual desire and sexual pleasure and all of those things are learned and grown together. Yes. And the more you fall in love with your spouse, the more that unity is like, it becomes more and more powerful. I'm sure you've had a similar experience. I've never met another couple who'd say, oh, I love my spouse less now. If it is a healthy marriage, that isn't true. And so the more love you have for that person, being able to be united to them in fullness is just a more immense gift. And so that did take the pressure off. But I do think some other secular impressions had crept in terms of what I had mentioned. Oh, kids will come, and then we're not going to have as much time or availability for this. And so I did feel kind of this now or never, like if we don't, try to come together as often as possible, sure, then we're missing out, and there was a point and then, we got pregnant about 4 months into marriage, point within pregnancy where my husband, just brought to me the thought of, hey, are we coming together for me? Like, are you coming here for me? And it was just kind of a call out of, it kind of seemed like I had this undiscussed expectation of amount of times, if that makes sense. And I don't even think I could have identified that before he brought it to me. And it did help me kind of pause and reflect and go, you're right. Where is this coming from? And I realized that I had this fear mindset of the baby's coming. I don't know what our life might look like, our intimacy might look like after that. But that he felt that, like he could tell that there was something else, a part of that desire. And he was able to name it. And so I love that in a spousal unity, when you are really in tune with each other, he noted the difference, that our unity wasn't maybe fully there. And we were able then to have that conversation, and I was able to have that self-reflection and grow through that conversation.
That's really beautiful. Wow.
Yeah. I think, and so I've been able to help a lot of women who are in that engaged into marriage process. A lot of the women in my Magdala group too, it was about half already married and half of them were engaged and got married during the course of our group. And to hear a similar, what their expectations were, what those conversations might look like, but then entering into marriage and them realizing similar things of what they maybe thought was going to happen or vice versa. And like I said, those conversations only increase after marriage starts in terms of needing to be on the same page, checking in with one another, what those expectations are, and maybe change into, I don't know, for you, like what were some of your things prior to marriage that maybe some expectations you had, and then you had to have those conversations afterwards?
Yeah, great question. I think again, the biggest expectation I had was that it was all going to feel the same, and that I had kind of permanently colored my experience of sexuality. And so a part of the unlearning for me was that like I could trust the newness that was being presented to me. And I think I definitely had expectations for quantity too, or different things like that came up in the first year, definitely in the first year. And I also got pregnant. I think I was 6 or 7 months after marriage, but and that quickly, I had a horrible first trimester. I know I remember you being really sick for a couple too. Yeah. So I think that brings up conversations about just mental availability more than anything. Like I am throwing up all the time. I'm not here. And I know we had to have some conversations too about that. And it's funny that you mentioned the fear of like the baby coming and things changing, because that was very much the expectation I had. That's for multiple reasons. I definitely thought that any romance, any sex life disappeared after children, for a lot of reasons. And so I think there was a lot of healing to be done in that. And I think the word that comes to mind, like as you're speaking to, is just freedom in the sexual relationship. And like, I have found that sometimes like the chief reason that I'm lacking freedom in sexual unity with my spouse is that distrust of my own desire of like, hey, you are actually free here. You're safe here. You can believe that you're pursuing the good. Like it's rooted in that old like self-condemnation, self-loathing that I think recovery continually brings healing to. And letting go of any anger or resentment towards yourself and forgiving yourself for the past. Or sometimes what was present, of like a trigger or different things. But, and I'm very blessed to have been sober before getting married and have maintained that throughout my marriage. But I think, that's been the most freeing thing for me is learning to see the good in my spouse and in myself in this regard. There's been so many conversations. I think, as you're talking to of like this idea of sex getting better, and like the word comes to mind of like richer. It feels like a richer, fuller experience over time. Yes. Again, that's not an expectation that I had for multiple reasons. But I think that's been a really beautiful thing to see actualized. I think of, Sheila Ray Gregory. Do you read any of her stuff? Yeah.
I have some stuff.
I think she does God's work. Like, I think she does great stuff, like on sex specifically, but she describes, she describes sex as a celebration of the relationship, which I think is a really beautiful way to put it. And she said you can celebrate like a resolution of a difficult conflict, or you can celebrate having fun together. You can celebrate a deep emotional connection. There's so many different things about the unity that you can celebrate. Rather than like, this is, and I think this is an expectation that a lot of people have to overturn. And I know I had some of this too, is that this is the ultimate expression and all unity must converge at this road, right?
This
and
is
like
the pinnacle.
Yeah, it's the pinnacle. And I think especially navigating like marriage and motherhood, I've just come to see, it is a celebration of the relationship, but there are many ways to celebrate and there are many moments of unity, and there's spiritual unity, there's emotional unity. And I think we say that, we kind of like give that lip service, and they're like, but it should end in this. And I think just learning like, I don't know, especially if you're navigating NFP and different things, it can't always end in that, like depending on your season. And
the word
I know
that
that, oh, sorry, go ahead.
You said celebrate, and the word I like to use is it's a fruit of your marriage too, because there are multiple fruits of your marriage. And also like if someone's listening to this and this is not their experience, right? Like their sexual unity didn't become richer in their marriage life, which that has been the case for women I've worked with, and there could be a grief there, but there's also then it's okay, where's the relationship at? Where's the emotional intimacy? Where's the spiritual intimacy? Because the physical intimacy, is a celebration or a fruit of the relationship. And so let's instead of trying to fix the physical intimacy side, let's look at the other areas that are probably lacking. Because if the fruit isn't good, then let's look at the tree, right? And so that's kind of what you're saying in terms of celebration. I love that because it puts it in that proper context of it's not the pinnacle, it's a beautiful expression of. And as I mentioned, we're pregnant with number 5. There was a 4-year spread, but because when I was pregnant with number 4, my husband injured his back to the point where for a year and a half, he was in and out of the hospital and ended up having back surgery. And there was a 7-month period where he couldn't lift over 10 pounds. And I had 4 kids, 4 and under. And I was at this point of, I could not get pregnant now. The risk of that completely demolishing our family. That was a risk we just couldn't take. And so being very conservative in our natural family planning journey. But I would say our marriage was so strengthened through that time. And the richness, right, that we're all talking about here. We could probably do a whole nother podcast on that. I think that has also just allowed my ministry and like what I help women with blossom, because as we said, it's not a need. Sex is not a need, and it is a gift, and it is a fruit, and it is a good. And so those desires for it are important, and they should not be cast away. If your spouse is coming to you and expressing desire, we don't just say, hey, no, you don't need it, so move on, kind of thing. But it's good, and we have to take that into the conversation, into how we're expressing our marriage and doing all of those things. But that also to recognize there are other goods, there are other things that need to be cultivated and enriched in our marriages. And when you look at that from just the perspective of sexual compulsion or anything like that, the healing that comes from being pursued outside of physical intimacy is crucial, of knowing, I hear the stories of, oh, well, we're not coming together for this period of time for whatever reason. And so now he's pouting, or, there's less conversation or whatever it is. And then again, that probably leads to poor fruit when you are able to come together. And so being pursued, I think, by my husband for who I am and not the physical intimacy side, there was a lot of healing there as well. And just all of those pieces that you don't always think about prior to marriage. Again, whether it's the world telling you, oh, once you do, it's a free-for-all or whatever, to realize there are going to be many times, whether it's sickness, travel, baby, broken backs, right, that are going to change that dynamic, and to know that that's part of the vows and that's part of marriage.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, it's all woven together. Like, I think that's been one of the healing aspects for me, is encountering how deeply ingrained sexuality is in the human person. And like you're saying, like, it's interrelated to everything else. And so that's true for whether we're talking about virtue or vice. And And I think if in a marriage, like sexual compulsion is still present, whether in one or both spouses, like that's why, is because this is interwoven into your story, and into who we are. And again, whether for good or for ill. And so if these things are still going on, it's not a condemnation of you. It's just like, there's more to explore. And I think the attitude you're talking about too of, I feel like we could go for another hour, but the attitude that you're talking about of, yeah, just like in all things avoiding like an idolization of sexual union, but also we can't degrade it. Like we can't set it aside and condemn ourselves for it. And desire can always be honored, even if it can't be actualized, and or can be actualized differently, like outside of a sexual space. And that's part of the sacrament too, is like this is a realm, this is a world that you get to be in together, and that can be a very like holy, happy thing. I feel like I could pick your brain again for another hour, but we can start landing the plane because you got kids to pick up, I got dinner to cook, so motherhood calls. It calls.
It always does.
Yes, but so good to have you, Kelsey. And I know I wanted you to briefly be able to mention a project you're working on that I think our audience is going to be excited about. So I'd love for you to say a couple words about your upcoming book, but yeah, and then we'll close out. But I would love for our listeners to hear about that.
Yeah. Well, I think, thank you for that brief moment of introduction. I think all the things that we're talking about, and we're talking about, sexual compulsions, but also the unity with our spouse and purity culture, secular culture, really just the lack of truth being communicated to and through us. And that has become, obviously, as I've become a mother, a huge passion with imparting truth to my children and making sure and hoping that they have the right understanding of God's design for their sexuality, for who they are, for the goods, the fruits, the celebrations, right? That are intended to be, so that they can recognize the counterfeit version that's in the world and things like that. And so in my journey of figuring out, how do I help the younger generations? How do I help other parents? How do I help other people? And I've been researching and trying to find the right resources, and they haven't existed. So as the Lord invites, the see a need, fill a need, I am working on a parent resource, but it's like a children fully illustrated book for 3 to 6 year olds as a starting point. And of course, then the Lord is like, what about 7 to 10 year olds, as I now have an 8-year-old. But right now I'm working on a children's book that will help navigate the conversation between parent and child of, why our bodies are good, but then also that we have, it matters how we show them to others and how we see others, and basically introducing, this is what pornography is. And if you see it, I am a safe place to talk about this with. Amazing. And so just to be that first step of conversation, because I think that can be such a stumbling block for so many parents to not know how to navigate that conversation. So wanting to give them a resource to make that possible, just so we can continue this conversation for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I'm super excited, and we'll obviously have more information as things get closer, but really excited about that. Thanks for joining, Kelsey, and just sharing your wisdom and your story. And I bet we will have you back sometime soon. I feel like we could plan a whole podcast season around just things that got mentioned today, but super grateful to have you.
Yep, anytime. Great to see you too.
Thanks for listening. Check out more podcast episodes, blog posts, and how to get involved with Magdala by visiting our website, magdalaministries.org. Your love is meant to change the world. We hope to see you soon.